Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 277, Intense Battle. When Shui Yanqing invited the heir apparent back to the palace, he produced the former emperor's endorsement and Prince Jin's personal seal to show the Grand Secretariat. Yao Wenyu brushed his finger lightly over his pale lips. But these objects have no relevance whatsoever to one another. Prince Jin's personal seal was not stamped on the endorsement itself. If these objects alone can prove that Li Jianting is Prince Jin's daughter of lawful birth, then the writings of the late nobles in the study of my Yao clan are all proof of sovereignty. Even if Sen Yu's limbs were growing increasingly cold, he could not show any more signs of weakness. All eyes were on this face-to-face talk at the foot of the city today. All it took was one wrong answer to doom Chu capital. He composed himself before saying, when Her Majesty entered the palace, the Grand Secretariat carried out a public verification right there and then on the imperial court. The Empress Dowager also gave the nod to confirm that Her Majesty was of the Li clan's bloodline. The rain in the wind made a ruckus as it pelted down upon the oil paper umbrella like exploding beans. After the passing of the former emperor, the Li clan fell into decline, Yao Wenyu said. The so-called public examination on the imperial court you speak of is merely based on the one-sided words of Shui Yanqing. The Empress Dowager lived alone deep in the inner palace, with eunuchs in power holding her hostage on the inside and sycophantic officials coercing her on the outside. So, could she have been able to tell the truth? Sen Yu felt a punch to his guts. He stepped back in a fluster and sputtered, sycophantic. How can you say I am a sycophantic official? On the day of the public examination, the whole court of civilian and military officials was present. Whoever dares to coerce the Empress Dowager, I will be the first to kill him with my own hands. Fine. You are loyal. I admire you for it. Yao Wenyu pulled out a letter from his sleeve pocket and said to Sen Yu, I happen to have a confidential letter from third young Miss Hua, which details the fact that Han Cheng coerced the Empress Dowager with the city's accounts, along with a family letter between the Empress Dowager and third young Miss. All of them are affixed with the Empress Dowager's personal seal. An uproar arose in the rain the moment this letter emerged. Sen Yu had never expected Yao Wenyu to have genuine proof. That chill soared up his spine. It was not Zongbo that was in danger today at all, but Chu capital. Bracing himself against the edge of the table next to him, he said, third young Miss Hua has been away from Chu capital for a long time. She no longer waits upon the Empress Dowager. Her words. Third young Miss is the main madam of Qidong. Yao Wenyu pressed in hard with each word. If her words are not to be trusted, why are Qidong's 300,000 strong garrison troops still not deployed to date? Muffled thunder crashed in the rain. Yao Wenyu released his grip and let the letter fall into a water puddle. The Qi clan would rather lose their century of prestigious reputation than send troops to the emperor's aid because the one sitting on the throne today is not a sovereign of the Li clan at all. Shui Yanqing deliberately misrepresented the fact, calling a deer a horse. He not only deceived everyone in the imperial court but also fraudulently used a girl from a pleasure quarter to pose as the imperial heir. A girl from a pleasure quarter. You delude people with rumors and lies. A student pointed at Yao Wenyu and snapped, Her Majesty is the daughter of a farming household in Chu capital. She has long had a benevolent reputation among her neighbors. How muddle-headed. There was no warmth in Yao Wenyu's eyes. Li Jianting has never summoned her adoptive parents after ascending to the throne. If she is truly benevolent and filial, she will not be so unconcerned and indifferent to her adoptive parents. At this word, Sen Yu and even the students beside him all fell onto their butts on the ground. The capital command troops of Chu capital whispered among themselves in horror. Dark clouds had already pressed in towards the palace halls in Chu capital. Amidst the lightning and thunder, a flash of lightning illuminated the sinister-looking upturned eaves. That letter was swiftly passed throughout the various lands in the southwest as Jin Yiwei who were still hiding in Chu capital roved the streets and alleys. Qing occupied a tea house and watched as the raindrops pounded on the window paper. Li Jianting raised her head and listened to the thunder, well acquainted as she was with the pounding of battle drums. She asked the empty Mingli Hall, "Has the Prince of Dongli sent troops?" Feng Quan lit an incense stick and replied, "Soon." ******. The rustling sound of clothes chafing rang out from within the screen. Ji Ran sat upright across from the small table, taking Lady Liu's pulse through a handkerchief. The entire Qi clan is all patriotic and chivalrous people. The old commander-in-chief has an illustrious record of military achievements to his name and is in Her Majesty's good graces, Zhang Qingshan said. With the empire now in imminent danger and rife with internal strifes, it's time for the Qi clan to restore its position as the treasured weapon of the state. I advise Commander-in-Chief Qi not to corrupt the righteous cause over personal friendships. Revere your sovereign, and you will be hailed by all. The future glory and honor of the Qi clan are right at hand. You are a capable minister who governs a territory, so you are more familiar with civil administration than me. Qi Zuyan drank her tea. Since the time has come when the empire is in a crisis, we can skip all these clichés. Thick steam enshrouded the tea pavilion. Zhang Qingshan let out a wry, bitter laugh for a moment before continuing, "So the persuasion of honor and glory are all no more than mere platitudes. I came here just to share a few heartfelt words with Commander-in-Chief Qi." He set down the teacup and looked at Qi Zuyan. "Commander-in-Chief Qi, if the current emperor is incompetent, I would not have come today. But now, the revitalization of Great Zhou is right around the corner. As long as the internal threats are eliminated, the prosperity of the people will not be an absurd proposition." He paused for a moment. When the former emperor was on the throne, he did not involve himself in court administration. There were countless tussles for power between various factions in the imperial court. The year when Juexi was hit with a drought, I could not gather sufficient grains to distribute as relief aid. I was at my wit's end and could only borrow grains hastily, thus incurring a towering debt. It was Yanqing who hurried overnight to Chu capital to implore the Grand Secretariat to give me a way out. At that time, when Hua Saiqian wanted to kill me, it was also Yanqing who kneeled before the door of the Secretariat elder and pleaded with him to save me. All these years, he has been running around in his position as the Ministry of Revenue supervising secretary and fighting for a future for capable local officials. He went to great efforts and pains to build up the so-called proactive faction of the present day, one that has allowed Great Zhou to continue to keep struggling on after the reign of Tian Shen. Commander-in-Chief Qi, we dare not claim credit for ourselves, but in order to fight for a way out for Great Zhou, we can even bet our lives and those of our families. Zhang Wangxiao was not lying. The corrupted dynasty of the later years of the reign of Yanji had its roots in Chu capital, but the local regions were still doing all they could to keep going. Juexi's current ability to bear the weight of the burdens exerted on Great Zhou was not something that could be achieved overnight. It was the result of the cornerstone that people like him had laid down together over the past decade or so. After the reign of Xiand, Yanqing has been making every effort to persuade the imperial court to allocate manpower to Zongbo to clean up the mess there. Given the height of Hua Saiqian's power then, the Secretariat elder did not dare to act rashly in order to protect the officials of humble origins in the central administration. It was not until the fall of Hua Saiqian in the 8th year of the Xiand era that the Grand Secretariat had the intent to transfer me to Zongbo to take up the post as its provincial administration commissioner, but it was already too late. We had missed the golden opportunity. Not only were there bandits running rampant in the 6 prefectures, there was also the deeply rooted influence of the noble clans at play. Zhang Wangxiao spoke until he was emotionally worked up and could not help but pound the table in despondency. Letting loose a long sigh, he continued, "We have no troops and no power, so how are we to get about doing it?" The transfer notice alone took the Grand Secretariat half a year to deliberate over. The fragrance of tea was dimly discernible. He composed himself a little before continuing, "I had originally given up. It was Yanqing who supported Her Majesty and did his best to pursue the Dan city's field taxes. Commander-in-Chief Qi, if Her Majesty was a simpleton, an incompetent weakling like the former emperor, then let Shenzhequan rebel as he wishes. But there is now light at the end of the tunnel. He looked at Qizuyan and said with urgency, when Commander-in-Chief Qi wanted to send troops to assist Libei at the start of the first year of the reign of Shenjian, we agreed because of the foreign threat at hand, and we also provided military salaries and provisions. The situation is no longer like how it was during the reign of Xiand when the commander-in-chief and the generals had to enter the capital and kneel to beg for their military salaries. The Bianjun commandery's moldy grains case forced Lu Guangbai into rebelling, yet the Grand Secretariat has still yet to heed the imperial censor's advice to strip the Lu clan of their noble title and rank. They wanted to give the imperial court and Lu Guangbai a chance to start over again. Let's all start afresh. There will be no interference from the noble clans this time, only mutual sincerity and frankness between the civilian and military officials. The resurgence of Great Zhou is right now. Everything Zhang Wangxiao said today were heartfelt words that the others could not fathom, comprehend, or even be willing to understand. They were all turning cogs in the wheel that was Great Zhou. When mottled signs of rust began to show, they relied on generation after generation of virtuous talents to keep it oiled and running. This person was not just one person. He could be Qi Huilian in the early years, Hai Lianji in the latter stage, and even Xue Xiaozuo at present. They differed from the noble clans. Even if their ideologies were in conflict, or even if their philosophies were contradictory, they all expended their true abilities on civilian affairs without exception. They were the last gleam of hope for the survival of this old, decaying tree. Shenzhequan introduced the census registry in the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo, while we have long since implemented the household registration in Juexi. Ever since I had jurisdiction over the 13 cities, the yamen in the various areas have been checking every year that no land was lost, no field has gone to waste, and the trade at the port is thriving. If Shenzhequan had not insisted on interfering, the port of Yanji would not have been closed this year. Zhang Wangxiao said. The reason the 8 cities' field taxes were suspended was that Shenzhequan was pushing too hard. He self-proclaimed himself the prefectural lord in Zhongbo, and the 3 regions all termed him an overlord. The noble clans were going to be driven to take extreme measures, so there was no other alternative but to stop the investigation. Within the screen, Lady Lu suddenly exclaimed softly. Zhang Qingshan's voice came to an abrupt stop. He rose slightly. Hong Ying stepped out from behind the screen and whispered something in Hua Xianji's ear. Hua Xianji looked at Zhang Qingshan and said, "The madam is weak and frail, and after being on the move, the fetus is unstable. I fear she will have to stay here for a few days to recuperate." Lady Lu had been in ill health since the reign of Xiand. Zhang Qingshan knew that what Hua Xianji had said was true. Even as he was all caught up in attempting to convince them with his fervent rhetoric, he was on tenterhooks worrying about Lady Lu. For a moment, he lost his voice and could neither stand nor sit. Ji Ran said in a small voice, "An Itab Ha, the madam has to be put on medication." Zhang Qingshan could not help but ask, "What kind of medicine?" "She's frail and all the physicians she usually sees have been cautious." "I heard you have been married for several years, and yet your mother still wants to make her stand in attendance every day." "Never mind if it had been in the past," Hua Xianji said with a slightly reproachful tone, "but why does she still have to do so even when she's pregnant? What kind of rule is that?" The hardest thing for Zhang Wangxiao to speak of was his domestic affairs. His mother was widowed at an early age and against all the odds, raised him to be a provincial governor. The old madam typically could not be bribed with gold and valuables, nor did she form social connections with the womenfolk or the eunuchs. She wholeheartedly wanted Zhang Qingshan to be an uncorrupted official. The only drawback was that she was too strict with the family regulations in her management of the household, especially when it came to Lady Lu. Qizuyan originally had no intention to speak up. She had a whole bunch of family troubles at home to be vexed about, too. But then, she felt a nudge to her leg under the table. She came to a tacit understanding as she drank her tea and put down the cup. I think you should leave aside government affairs for now. There's still no news from Chu capital, so let's have Madam settled down first. Zhang Wangxiao had already sensed something amiss. Cautiously, he probed, about the sending of troops. I'll think about it for a couple more days, Qi Zuyan said with a serious countenance. 2 days later, I'll definitely give you an answer. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Fei Shi covered his head as he ran through the rain. He could hear the sound of discussions all around him, traitor, emperor, fake. The Chu capital, with its century of history, tottered precariously on the precipice in this rainstorm. He ran till his shoes were soaked. Someone knocked into him, causing him to stagger. The young Master Fei of the past was dressed simply. After the Marquis of Helion became paralyzed, his disreputable friends no longer associated with him. His residence could no longer afford the upkeep of its help, so they had no choice but to dismiss their older maids and servants. Fei Shi initially wanted to continue with his idle ways, but when he saw his elder sister Zheyu take care of her child while toiling away all night doing embroidery for a living, he realized then that his family was thoroughly broke. Now, he was eking out a livelihood by writing letters for others. Fei Shi cursed as he picked up the letters, "Damn dog must be blind to bump into me. Do you know that this grandfather used to lord it over?" He wiped the rain off his face. Finding the person who had fallen to the ground familiar, he kicked him with his foot. "Hey!" This person abruptly raised his head. He was so unkempt and disheveled that his face was not clearly distinguishable. He merely clapped his hands at Fei Shi and giggled in a silly manner, "Young Master Fei. Young Master Fei." Fei Shi pocketed the letter and said, You're an observant one." "That's me, all right." This lunatic was filthy all over, and only one of his feet had a shoe on. Shaking his head, he said, "Young Master Fei, looking for my eldest brother." "I'm not your eldest fucking brother." Fei Shi yanked his clothes back. Disgusted with the man's stench, he drove him away. "Shoo, shoo, shoo." This lunatic bared his mouth in a grin and really left. He jumped around in the rainstorm, yelling at everyone he came across, "Eldest brother, my eldest brother is a major official. A major official with a blade. What bad luck." Fei Shi muttered as he took 2 steps forward. He found this voice really familiar. He took a few more steps where he saw the run-down Han residence across the curtain of rain and suddenly froze right on the spot. "The capital command troops are passing through. Move out of the way." Military boots stepped on the rainwater, sending them splashing as they ran across the streets of Chu capital. The entire city was on high alert and the defensive weapons in the armory had all been taken out and moved to the top of the city wall. The news that Shen Zequan was about to fight his way in was even more widespread than the news of the female emperor's origins. The capital command troops bumped Fei Shi aside. He was still staring blankly in shock as he turned his head around like a wooden statue. Han Jin. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Yao Wenyu retreated unscathed after his verbal sparring with the masses. His donkey switched direction and the oil paper umbrella skewed slightly aside, causing the side of the hem of his green robe to be soaked by the rain. Still in shock, Sen Yu supported himself against the edge of the table and raised a hand, wanting to call out to Yuan Zhou again. A soldier behind soundlessly hoisted up a bow and arrow. The raised arrow pressed against his fingers, stretching the bowstrings taut. Raindrops, meanwhile, formed strings of beads at the edge of the oil paper umbrella. Yao Wenyu's breathing was slightly disorderly. The handkerchief he had been tightly clutching had long since been soaked red. Humiliated from the defeat, a student chased a few steps after him and said, "Shen Zequan seeks to obtain the empire. Wanting us to honor Shen Wei's memorial tablet is an act that is neither virtuous nor righteous. Even if I die, I will not kneel to him. The downpour of rain engulfed the sound of Yao Wenyu's coughing. When he looked back, however, his tightly pursed lips lifted slightly. The oil paper umbrella slid to the ground. His hair was soaked through, but he was resolute and decisive as he said, "All this time we rise in power in Zongbo, there have only been talks about the defeat of Shenwei's military troops. His lordship brought peace and stability to the lands for the sake of the common people, neither marrying nor begetting a son. Moreover, he wants to overturn the old case from the reign of Yanji to redress the injustice of the loyal officials. There is no need for you to kneel. When the country is stable and the commoners' livelihoods are restored, and when the granaries of the world are in abundance, his lordship." That arrow suddenly took leave of its bowstring, and the vibration from the bowstring flicked forth a spray of raindrops. In the blink of an eye, the sharp glint came before Yao Wenyu. No sooner said than done, a swift sword suddenly came thrusting down from among the green bamboo. Amidst the sound of collision between sword and arrow, Qiao Tianya landed on the ground. Shenzequan stood afar at the watchtower and looked in Chu capital's direction. The wind brushed against his overcoat, sending it fluttering. Surprisingly enough, there were bits of ice and snow mixed in with that torrential rain. "One does not execute the envoy when two armies are in talks," the prefectural lord said. "By doing so, Chu capital is counting on our lack of people to bully our Zongbo." Qiao Tianya slowly straightened up and stood in front of Yao Wenyu. Locks of his drenched hair covered his eyes. He pushed his sheath apart with his thumb and commanded, "Draw your blades." Rainwater covered the imperial army's armors as the glints of the blades instantly flashed in the bamboo forest. The incense burned out. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 278, Hero. Sen Yu knew it did not bode well the moment he saw the arrow flying, and when he saw the imperial army drawing their blades. He was in such a state of anxiety that he also coughed out blood. Cutting a sorry sight as he covered his mouth, he demanded, "Who fired the arrow?" Before he came here, he instructed Luomu to give strict orders to his soldiers not to make any move. Now that this arrow had been fired, Chu capital was doomed whether or not Yao Wenyu died. Tantai Hu swiftly charged forward with his blade and hollered in a booming voice, "You went back on your word. To hell with your talks at the foot of the city." The imperial army dashed orderly forth in the rain. Muddy water on the ground splattered all over. They wielded their blades in unison and at the same time, the front row spun around and slashed and barged into the motley crew of soldiers. Flashes of blades and glints of swords instantly enveloped the rainstorm. Tables and chairs on the platform overturned noisily with a clatter. The students helped Sen Yu up and retreated in a panic. "Stop," Sen Yu, who still held out false hopes, said in an urgent voice as he wiped his blood, "Your lordship, please hear me out." The imperial army had already charged across the boundary line. No one listened to Sen Yu. He was soaked in the rain, his official robe hanging loosely on his body. Enduring the assault of rain and snow on his face, he finally broke down and choked with sobs in Chu capital's direction, "I have failed Her Majesty." The bronze bell in Chu capital suddenly rang with a thunderous crash. Li Jianting knew that it was not the sound of thunder. Supporting herself against the pillars, she slowly stepped into the rain. The flower Huadian between her forehead dispersed pen-touching water. She looked at Shueziaozuo at the foot of the stairs, as if she had only just met him. "You have 10,000 taels of silver," Li Jianting raised her arm to point in Juexi's direction, "and the support of the common people. Go to Juexi and find a new emperor and you'd still be able to fight against Shenzequan again." Shueziaozuo looked at Li Jianting, too. After a long while, he raised his hands to take off his official wuxia hat and said, "I am a court minister of the Li clan." Li Jianting smiled and her laughter grew increasingly louder. She laughed until her face was wet with rainwater, betraying a little of her naivete. She moved closer and asked, "Teacher, have I succeeded in learning? All her life, she had been stuck in a precipice. It was only after gouging the nails of her 10 fingers rotten that she finally amounted to something. She came from a puddle of mud, yet she bore the weight of a collapsing universe. She was inquisitive, assiduous, and even a genius of sorts, but she was all the same too powerless to save the situation. It could have been better. It's all because my qualifications are mediocre. Xue Zaizuo looked at the wuxia hat in his hands. I am the blade that went off course. He had long known that he was not smart. He could not remember the essays on contemporary politics. All he could do was to memorize them by rote and stay up all night burning the midnight oil. Even the time he took to drink a mouthful of water was a waste. At the age where he was at his most impulsive, Emperor Guangcheng dealt a blow to his morale and drive, and he came to the understanding that the seemingly prosperous Great Zhou was in truth a barren expanse. It never occurred to Xue Zaizuo that he would take this path. But he witnessed the sudden flash of light that Qi Huilian had sparked, and that momentary light ignited his hope. He followed Qi Huilian, stubbornly believing that Great Zhou could still be saved, but the reality was always so disappointing. He revered and respected Hai Lianji, but then, he gradually went on separate ways with him. They all wanted to save Great Zhou. And none of them succeeded. You brought me to this position, but no one here is willing to be reasonable. The Empress Dowager instigated Han Cheng, who in turn dropped hints to Fu Man. They all wanted to kill me. Li Jianting raised her arm and rubbed away at the flower Huadian between her forehead until it was all red. Can't the Emperor fight back? If I don't kill them, I'll die. She turned around. We exercise caution and stay put in this cage, but even if we have ambitions, we do not have the power, let alone time. Li Jianting was very fair, a facade cultivated from being raised in the Xue's residence. Under this layer of attire, she was battered and bruised all over. When she stood here, she was Li Jianting. No one would ask about Ling Ting's whereabouts, as if Ling Ting deserved to die. In this world, people don't actually need the law to kill people. The sturdy bodies of men crushed my bones and I fell to the ground. Li Jianting looked back and said to Xue Zaizuo. The passers-by find me filthy. No one would hold them accountable, as if I lay there willingly. Die once and I deserve to be treated as discarded shoes, never allowed to stand again before others. The toll of the bronze bell grew increasingly longer. Rainwater flooded past the hems of their robes. The sky was so dark and overcast that the palace could not be clearly seen. Li Jianting said mockingly, was that my fault? Teacher, I heeded the teachings of the books and did not even kill those scums. The day you took me away from Shangyun Villa, I thought I would seek revenge, but you taught me benevolence, justice, morality, and virtue. I had to endure it to stay in this rotten palace. In all these years, there was not a single moment I've let go to waste. I chased after everyone, trying to catch up, but in the end, we still ended up with nothing to our name. Her chest heaved. There were so many things she could not take lying down. As her forbearance hit its limits, she finally erupted. Li Jianting pointed to her eyes and said, I don't rely on these eyes to live. I am not like anyone else. I am Li Jianting. She suddenly took off the golden hairpin in her hair and flung it into the rain. Contemptuously, she spat, to hell with virtues and deference. I am an emperor. I am the last emperor of the Li clan. Thunder detonated in the vault of heaven, illuminating everyone's faces that were snowy white in the rain. Li Jianting took off her soaked overcoat and even yanked off the cumbersome hairpins. Her voice was frosty as she proclaimed, I live and die with Great Zhou. ******. Chu capital had 8 city gates, all of which were now sealed off. The crossbow triggers at the top of the city wall made clicking sounds as they turned. The armory of the original 8 great training divisions had been emptied out, and bows and arrows densely lined the battlements. The Zongbo garrison troops, meanwhile, concentrated their attacks on the main east gate. With the main madam holding the fort in Qidong, Zhang Wangxiao won't be able to return. Yao Wenyu's gasps were slightly urgent as he propped himself up on the edge of the bed and said to Shen Zequin, "The path ahead has been paved. I will be here waiting for your lordship to return in triumph." Shen Zequin took off his own Yangshan Shui and set it beside Yao Wenyu's hand. "I am entrusting this blade to you. Give it back to me when I return." Yao Wenyu smiled sadly. "Why put me in such a spot? Suner is still in Tse province." The expression in Shen Zequin's eyes dimmed slightly. "You are still his teacher." Yao Wenyu could only answer, "Yuan Zhou shall do his best." Fei Sheng took off the overcoat for Shen Zequin. Shen Zequin took 2 steps back and held Yao Wenyu's eyes for a moment, then turned around to step out of the tent without another word. Fei Sheng got his hands on Yao Wenyu's handkerchief when he tidied up the tent in passing, and realized that the latter's handkerchief was soaked through and through with blood. Amidst the damp and dense flurry of snow outside the tent, the wind made its abrupt arrival known. Shen Zequin strode down the steps. The gazes of the imperial army on both sides never once strayed. As he walked, he secured his arm guard, and when he brushed past Tan Taihu, he heard the latter bellow with his head held high, "Tonight, we shall kill our way into Chu capital, and from here on, the fate of the empire shall be decided depending on which way the scale tips. His lordship takes the lead in bringing the soldiers forth in a charge, and we shall repay in kind with sincerity and loyalty." The garrison troops pounded their chests simultaneously with the imperial army. Their voices were so that deafening they drowned out the thunder, "We shall repay in kind with sincerity and loyalty." Luo Mu, having heard the bellows, dashed towards the city wall in the pouring rain and yanked a hold of the assistant commander who had fled back into the city. "Who fired the arrow?" he demanded. The assistant commander had returned wounded from the frenzied surge of the imperial army earlier. Hauling around his injured arm, he answered, "The rain is too heavy, Governor General." There was no way to see who it was at all. Luo Mu did give his motley crew of soldiers the instruction that they could act, but that had to be after the garrison troops made the first move. Even Luo Mu himself never expected Yao Wenyu to make an issue of the emperor's origins in this battle. This one arrow broke Chu capital's defense, imperceptibly making it clear to all that even heaven had turned away from them. "Shut the gates and fight to the death." Luo Mu released his hand, then shoved his deputy general hard and barked all around him in the heavy rain, "If we can't defend Chu capital, you and I will die." The streets were empty, for the commoners all had their doors and windows sealed shut as they hid away in their courtyard cellar, shivering uncontrollably. Public ditches discharged sewage, and the gaily painted pleasure boats on Kaling River swayed with the motions. This was the first time in hundreds of years that Chu capital felt a compelling sense of impending storm. The troops of the Shen clan are at the foot of the city. Pages of paper fluttered all over the Imperial Academy as the students covered their heads and wailed, "There is no hope left for Great Zhou." Luo Mu saw several rows of people from afar while he was urging the pounding of battle drums. He put down the drooping banner and stepped forth to kneel and kowtow. Loudly, he said, "This humble subject has failed to live up to Her Majesty's kindness. Tonight, I shall repay my country with my death. I vow to never wallow in the same mire as the rebels." Kong Qiu hobbled forward and held onto Li Jianting's arm. He choked with emotions all around him. "Her Majesty is here, as am I. If we can win tonight, all of you here will be Great Zhou's most trustworthy subjects. If we can't, then I, Kong Qiu, shall be the first to jump off to die for my country when the city is breached." Luo Mu was so startled by Kong Qiu's bleak and miserable voice that he broke out in a cold sweat. He raised his head and saw each of the Grand Secretariat ministers looking solemn. Clearly, they were not putting on a show of appeasement, they really had the determination to give their lives for the cause. Luo Mu did not expect them to be willing to go to such an extent for Great Zhou, and in that instant, he felt ashamed of himself, but at the same time, he also took his chances. Shen Zequin only has 25,000 soldiers. This battle is doable. Your Majesty and the various excellencies. The words had yet to fully leave Luomu's mouth when the stone catapults sprang into action. The massive boulder smashed into the city gate with a thunderous crash, and the century-old Chu capital stone inscription monument promptly exploded apart into smithereens. Xue Xiaozuo brandished an arm to stop Li Jianting from moving. Shenzhequan has begun his assault on the city. Protect the emperor. ******. Holding a dagger in his mouth, Jiao Tianya moved himself with his elbows and crawled in the dark and damp public ditch. Back then, after the public ditches case, Pan Lin gave the construction blueprint of Chu capital's public ditches to Xiao Qi, who in turn left this blueprint in his Plum Blossom residence. When Shenzhequan rebelled and fled from Zongbo, Jiao Tianya and Fei Sheng relied on this blueprint to escape from the heavy siege in Chu capital. They had long since committed the public ditches that intersected Chu capital to memory. Jiao Tianya's chin was buried in the stinking sewage. He lifted his head slightly and slammed his shoulder against the slanting wooden planks above him at the end of the ditch. The chains and lock on the wooden planks shifted away with a clatter. Qing, who had shaved himself clean of his mustache, traded glances with Jiao Tianya and promptly broke out into a smile as he reached out to pull the ladder out. "It has been over a year since we last met," Qing said. "How is his lordship?" Jiao Tianya took off his dagger and answered succinctly, "Fine. We have been keeping an eye on the movements within Chu capital these past few days." Qing cut the pleasantries and fished out a blueprint with areas circled in various colors. "The scorpions are here." Jiao Tianya looked at those dense clusters of circles covering the blueprint and felt his blood freeze. These people can't put down roots and can only drift around Chu capital waiting on standby for their orders. The majority of them are people of various trades from the 3 doctrines and 9 schools of thoughts. Qing covered up the crossed out areas. His lordship was right in his guess. They have a leader directing the operation. Jiao Tianya stared at the location where the leader was. The scorpions want to hold off his lordship for Amu-air. Qing circled the blueprint with his finger. Before they make their move, we have to act first. Not a single one must be spared. Qing's finger stopped at the location where the palace was. Jiao Tianya did not keep away his dagger. He said in a hoarse voice, "Old profession, old regulations. Since master gave the order to kill, then no one will return alive once the Xiaochun blade falls. We will split up and act separately." He nailed the dagger to the palace. "I'll head here." The defense of the main east gate had not even hit the hour mark when the garrison troops that had circled around to the south side gate near the Mount Feng military drill grounds rammed out a gap in the gate. How were the main forces of the capital command troops guarding the main east gate to know that Shenzhequan had learned this speedy assault from Hassan? It was not only fast but also ruthless. The capital command troops at the south side gate pressed up against it, but before they could shout out the signal, a blade was wedged in the gap. "Pass the word," a young general of the capital command troop shouted, "the south side gate has been breached." Another ram instantly caused the city gate to slide sideways, which subsequently knocked the capital command troops inside the city over to the ground. The Imperial Army, who had been waiting outside, braced themselves against the gap and spread open their legs like monkeys to flip in. The archers inside the city readied themselves, but the reactions of the Imperial Army were even faster. They shrank their heads back and hid behind the city gate. The capital command troops had yet to breathe a sigh of relief when they heard the gate panel of the city gate emit a grating, jarring creak. To think that the Imperial Army had actually climbed over each other's shoulders to the top of that properly mounted, well-crafted, and heavy-duty city gate and tore it down. "It works." An Imperial Army soldier rapped on the gate panel and shouted to his brothers below him. "Guess what? This gate is the same fucking gate second master led us to repair for the Ministry of Works. Damn handy it is. Hoist it up, and it can block the arrows and smash this bunch of silly dogs to death." The morale of the capital command troops that had seen a sharp boost from the presence of the emperor existed for only a moment as Shenzequan forcibly held it down by the head and obliterated it clean. The moment the south side gate was breached, the imperial army was back in their elements like ducks to water. Under the crowding and jostling, Kong Qiu protected Li Jianting. Her hair at the temples was disheveled, and she was mudded all over. Her ears were also buzzing from the constant bombardment from the catapults. Amidst the wails and urgent cries of countless people, her gaze moved past the mud and dust and fell upon the prefectural lord of Zongbo, who was the subject of rumors. 2 years ago, Shenzequan fled through the main east gate, leaving behind a shouting Qi Huilian with his hands raised at the tightly shut city gate. Now, he rode his horse across the public roads, bringing along not only his advisors but also his mighty army. Traitor! Li Jianting hissed through clenched teeth. Shenzequan looked at her apathetically, using a sufficiently direct way to tell her that the young emperor was no match for a genuine hero with mere designs alone. From here, he would stomp open the main gates of Chu capital. End chapter.